Hi, everyone, and welcome to the 119th episode of the Atlas Society Asks. My name is Jennifer Grossman. My friends know me as JAG. I'm the CEO of the Atlas Society. We are an educational organization introducing young people to the ideas of Ayn Rand in fun, creative ways like animated videos and graphic novels. Today, we are joined by Mark Pellegrino, a man who needs very little introduction. But before I get to that, I want to remind all of you to begin asking your questions, typing them in, whether it is on Zoom, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, or YouTube. Use the comment section. We'll get to as many of them as we can. And this is a very unique opportunity. So please go ahead and share this on social media as well. So Mark Ross Pellegrino is an actor very well known for his roles in series like Dexter, Lost, Supernatural, Quantico, and of course, many, many others. He's appeared in over 40 movies, including The Big Lebowski and National Treasure. But besides his acting and film career, Mark is also an intellectual activist and an objectivist who co-founded the American Capitalist Party to provide an alternative platform to the current political duopoly in government. Mark, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So always love to start the show with a bit of an origin story. So I'd be very eager to hear about your early years, where you grew up, how you got into acting, and of course, how you discovered Ayn Rand.
So I grew up in Van Nuys, California, culture capital of the world. And I would like to say that a lot of my life was determined by being very aware of where I was going at every moment of my life, but that hasn't always been the case. So I dropped out of college. I was sort of disillusioned with college. I got straight A's, but dropped out after my first year and was working in a gas station and realized that I had to do something with my life. I just wasn't sure what. I saw an advertisement for a modeling agency, a place called John Robert Powers, which was basically a sort of a scam, a pay-for headshot.
I remember
scam.
it. Yeah.
Yes. And I decided, since many of the things they were offering were for free, I'd check it out. I might as well give modeling a try. I got all kinds of headshots and classes in modeling for free, and even did a runway show or two, and then stumbled into a commercial workshop class with a fairly popular commercial actor at the time in the 80s. His name was Bob Hover. And for some reason, I still haven't quite sussed out, he thought I had talent, and he set me up with an agent. And the agent started sending me out, and I started getting pretty close on a couple of jobs. I just was, of course, very green and had no idea what I was doing. Had no dream to be an actor from the time I was a kid. Movies were just something I occasionally saw every other weekend. So he set me up with a list of acting coaches. I picked the closest and cheapest, and it happened to be the best acting school, I think, on the West Coast. It's produced such fine actors as James Franco and Scotty Kahn and Ashley Judd and Jeff Goldblum, a whole host of folks that I think are phenomenal, and I've had a great time working with over the years. And it was there that I got exposed to the craft of acting. The Meisner approach to acting was sort of an iteration of Stanislavski's method, but with some inventions that a man named Sanford Meisner threw in to the technique. I fell in love with the technique, but not with Hollywood. So I started training and learning the craft, and then gradually getting out there and learning the difference between working in class and working outside, which is, there's quite a difference. It takes quite a while for you to get out of your own way out there in the real working world when there's results and pressures that you don't have in class. And over the years, I began to acclimate to that and integrate my technique properly into the work. And then I started teaching there and doing tons of plays and repertory at that theater, eventually leaving the theater in 2012, 2014, because work became too intensive and I had to I was living in other countries basically and working, and had no time to go back and pursue theater or teaching, which are really my favorite things to do in the world. My favorite thing to do in the world is to teach. I got exposed to Ayn Rand in the same accidental way in acting class. I met a guy from Long Island, and he and I developed a pretty close relationship, and we would go out and rehearse with each other and then hang out at a place called Gorky's Cafe in Hollywood. It was a ironically Russian diner that was open all 24 hours, and we would read plays there and argue basically about philosophy and politics until dawn. We were in our 20s, so we could do that. And I would always lose these political arguments with him. I was an environmentalist. I was a registered Democrat, very much on the left, like so many folks in Hollywood. And it was really annoying that I would lose these arguments with him. So I thought if we could do an exchange of books, I would be able to introduce him to intellectuals who would get through to him. He would see that I was right. I was just articulating it all wrong. So we did a book exchange. I gave him 5 books. I don't remember them at this point. He gave me 2, The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, and it changed my life.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's how I became that was my first acquaintanceship with Ayn Rand. And that's basically the beginning of my career.
Now, I understand that you went to Catholic schools, not because your family was particularly religious, but they just felt that it would provide a better and a safer education for you. Did that kind of prime you to be interested in big questions or philosophy, or why are we here and what is good and what is bad? Or did it kind of maybe set you back?
No, I found myself always intrigued by those big questions. I had a friend who lived down the street from me, who still, he bought the house from his mom and still lives in that house that he grew up in. And long before I went to high school, he and I, from grammar school to middle school, would have long conversations with each other, primitive philosophical conversations with each other. I went to the Catholic high school finally because I grew up in the day and age when California and Los Angeles was using children as a social experiment, and they were busing some children into the inner city and taking some kids from the inner city and busing them into the suburbs, which frankly created lots of chaos and violence and unfortunate dangers. And my mom decided to take me out of that at great cost to herself. The good news is that spurred me to do something for her. So I took a job and paid for my books and tried to contribute to my education in whatever way I could. And being at a place like Notre Dame, which was which had a pedigree that went back to 1947, and it had such a deeply respected academic reputation, I wanted to excel, and so it really pressed me to be a good student, to respect studying, just the act of studying and learning. And of course, we had 4 years of religion, which is a sort of philosophy. And so we dealt with big questions, ethical questions, in a way that I don't think most high school kids had to deal with. And so that definitely further got me interested in the big stuff.
Interesting. I wonder if we're of the same vintage. I think you're probably a bit younger than me, but when I was growing up in Newton, Massachusetts, we were similarly doing this kind of social experiment on children, and it was horrible. My parents, continue to be very, very big progressives, and were thrilled to offer their child as part of this experiment. I mean, actually, I remember even earlier, I always found myself volunteered for studies on children, and I was like, you know what? I know there's somebody behind that mirror, but with the busing experiment, it was terrible, and I, for whatever reason, particularly attracted the ire and the hatred and probably some envy, and it led to some pretty dangerous situations of bullying. And it was that experience for me which primed me many years later to kind of discover Ayn Rand and have it resonate so much with me, because I was like, Yeah, it really wasn't anything that I was doing. It wasn't my weaknesses, it was my strengths. Um, so, you said you read those two books. Any favorite characters? And I understand you kind of went on to read all the rest of her works and then really make a serious study of the philosophy. And so would you say that it's been the fiction or the nonfiction that's been most resonant with you?
Oh, that's hard to say. I mean, because the fiction is sort of the concretization of everything, right? So it says more than a million words. The image of Rourke, says more than a million words, and he is my favorite character. Partly because he's an artist, and he's an artist in the truest sense of the word. He stands alone against an immoral society, and he has what we could all have. Rarely do you come across heroes that, especially nowadays with our emulation of superheroes and our denigration of human beings, it seems, rarely do you find heroes who have every quality that they have is totally attainable to you. It's within your grasp, and his unbreached self-esteem, his perfect integrity, that is not impossible. We could all not only aspire to that, but actually embrace it and have it for ourselves if we wanted it. And he's been my guiding light through Hollywood. I think artists should be the barometer of our ethics, of our morals, what's good, what's bad in our society, and they should fearlessly stand against what's wrong. And so often the opposite is the case, but they don't have Rourke as their guide. I do. So I know that my integrity is more important than the money I make in my career, and so I'm willing to risk those things and to risk my popularity in the business to say what I think is right, and to be at least in the vanguard of what I think is a real cultural fight going on right now that could go either way. I mean, we're in very interesting times. I think the most interesting times that our history has ever known. At least as interesting as the Civil War, at least as interesting as the colonial battle for independence. This is even a deeper spiritual, I think, potential to win or lose this battle. So,
and how would you phrase or frame the competing forces and the stakes?
It's always collectivism versus individualism, in my view. And the stakes are a complete surrender to collectivism, which will ultimately be the loss of your own life and individual happiness, your own moral agency. People seem to be somewhat content with that, or not so much content as used to giving up more and more of their moral agency. And I would like to make them discontented with that. And so I produce videos as you do to try to get people thinking about concepts that I think they have erroneous presumptions about. Like, you might talk about greed, I might talk about selfishness, and by saying something in just the right combination of words, you can sometimes make it click for somebody that they've been thinking wrong the entire time. And that's transformative. That's transformative. So
yeah. Where because I want to put those into the comment sections across our platforms. What's the best place to subscribe to see those videos?
Well, if you go to my Twitter, Mark R. Pellegrino, at Mark R. Pellegrino, pinned to my profile is my Reality Check YouTube channel. So you could just go on that and check it out.
Okay. We'll make sure that we do that. Well, speaking of integrity and being willing to lose a lesser value for a greater one. And clearly, you're a living example of what's important to you and what you're willing to let go. You'd mentioned earlier that, when you were a young actor and acting student, that you were, on the left, and that most of Hollywood is more on the left. Has that been an impediment to your career? I mean, you look at your IMDb page and it's just prolific, and I didn't realize that your more television and film career came after your theater career. Has it been an issue, or is it one that you wouldn't necessarily see, that it would just be a slow freeze? Or
Yeah, it really depends on the situation. Fortunately for us objectivists, we don't fall into the tribes. So it's very hard for anyone on the left to classify you as right. They try sometimes on social media where you have 140 characters and it's easier for them to pigeonhole you. But since they can't quite classify you as someone on the right, and I identify as a liberal of the classical sort, they really don't know what to do with that. And I would say that at the grassroots level, there's quite a bit more open-mindedness than you would think, than at least is portrayed out there. I think the media likes us to be at each other's throats. I think they like to paint things as this stark binary issue between two. Well, we don't see it as binary because they're sort of the same tribes, battling out over particulars. But they like that conflict. They think that that's sort of the essence of the way things work. But at the grassroots level, people are quite open to these ideas. I think because we have a unique way of articulating current events and perspectives, and they've never heard them before. It challenges them, and it's not malignant. It's not as forceful even as Rand. I think objectivists have learned over the years to not mitigate the messaging, but make it user friendly, right, and more accessible to people. And I think people get that. And I've turned around lots of people. At the very minimum, I get their respect when they talk to me. They know I'm not some bonehead. And
yeah, well, I mean, that must be yet another one of your unique talents. And and I wonder also if, I don't know if I would call it a class divide, but I had recently Jack Carr, author of the Terminal List, and he had just gotten finished with working with Chris Pratt on the Amazon series Terminal List, and I asked him, what it was like working on set, and I had him on because I love his novels, but also because I learned that he was a huge admirer of Ayn Rand and her novels, not an objectivist, but informed by the book to a certain extent, and how he found that. And he just said that especially the people that were working cameras and the grips and the makeup and the huge army of production that comes along with it, it was not the stereotype that he had come to the situation with, that he was more kind of pleasantly surprised that people were more open-minded.
Look, like I have to say that I think the actors in the acting community, in the movie making world, television making world, are handicapped by their teaching, right? So if you're in the technical arts, you can't avoid the mental elements and the technical arts in filmmaking. It's not just about your emotions or quote unquote intuitions. You got to do a lot of thinking to set up a shot a certain way, a lot of thinking about how to light it a certain way, a lot of thinking about other technical aspects, special effects, makeup effects. All that stuff requires a combination of artistry and the mind that actors are robbed of in their early training. They are made aliens in their own body. They're taught to cut off their heads. They're taught that their mind is not part of the creative process, and that starts from the very early stages of training. Even in a training, even in a technique like Sanford Meisner method, the purpose is to deal with self-consciousness. But in dealing with self-consciousness, they tell you all the time not to think. The way you wouldn't necessarily be thinking if you're in the boxing ring, you would be reacting reflexively to situations that you've integrated so much that they're just a part of your body. but in the world of acting, they don't talk about it in those terms. They talk in disparaging terms about thinking and reason. And I always tried to eliminate that aspect of the training for my actors, because interpretation is an integrative process. When you're interpreting a script, you're using both your mind and your feelings in an integrative process, and you can't cut one or the other off. You need them both. So I think that fact alone makes actors feel that they're, as Rand might say, paraphrasing, that their emotions are tools of cognition, and so they tend to think emotionally in just about every aspect of their life, which is one of the reasons why so many of their lives are in chaos and their politics are so bad, and they're so easily used by the people in power. So I think I try in my own way to change that. But it's been not just it's not in just the acting field. I think it's in arts in general. There's a push towards that Rousseauian romanticism of primitivistic man, that culture and civilization corrupt you, and it's all through, it permeates through most teaching styles of acting. So I try to be different in that respect.
Fascinating. That's a totally new perspective to me, and I'm going to have to digest that, but makes a heck of a lot of sense. You were talking about, in boxing, it becomes reaction and muscle memory and reflexes. I understand that you are a student of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Is that correct?
I'm a very bad student of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I love it, but my body hasn't cooperated with me for years with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So after my surgical procedure that I told you about, I am actually going to get back into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in the next couple of months. But I am a huge fan of the art. Just not the best practitioner.
Well, my ex-husband is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu instructor. So
he's a black belt. He's a black belt in BJJ.
Yeah, Rafael Corral.
Okay, man, that's gnarly. Instant respect.
I'm a fan of the art. Wasn't so much a fan of everything, but we're still friends.
Well, some people don't let the martial artist's way translate into their everyday life, unfortunately.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's also there are aspects of the Brazilian culture which maybe I wasn't able to adapt myself to adequately. So, okay. But I wanted to ask you about that, because it always looked to me like there was a little bit more chess involved, that it wasn't all instinct, or maybe it becomes it once, these moves, you know them because they're technical moves. It's not just hit, hit this way, hit that way. It's about leveraging and, being strategic in a way.
That's precisely it. I mean, even in boxing, they call good fighters fighters who can exercise good ring generalship. So that's not just imposing your will on the other person in the ring or in the octagon or on the mat. It's an ability to see what the other person's doing, figure out what their weaknesses are, and play the strategic game of trapping them into being on the receiving end of your violence. And that is very thoughtful, cerebral process. The guys who do it best, especially in jiu-jitsu, I think attracts very cerebral people, because you are setting up moves in advance. The best jiu-jitsuists, which is probably why I'm not that great at it yet, but the best of them, are setting up moves 6 or 7 or 8 moves. They're 7, 8 moves ahead of you. And that's an incredible amount of brain power to be expending in those moments.
Yeah, that's unless you get put to sleep too many times.
Yes, yeah. Well, you have to go there too. You have to make all those mistakes before you can integrate all those options in your work. All right. I'll let you know when I'm there.
Okay. I'm being selfish, but not in a good way, because I love our audience, and you guys always have terrific questions. So, and I know that you come back in order to have an opportunity to chat with our guests. So let's take a look here. Jackson Sinclair on Instagram is asking, why is there such a fascination with superhero shows and movies? Where is the great but normal hero?
Right. I mean, that there's probably a few objectivist philosophers who could answer that question better than me, but I definitely feel, human beings need heroes. We need them like we need food, and we get them somewhere. And we've been in the dominant perspective, respecting human beings now is to look at them with a jaundiced eye. They're fallen and broken and incapable of, rising above, whatever faults they have, and acquiring values. In the end, they're going to lose. And we've gotten into even the greatest heroes. We have to see their flaws in order to somehow identify with them. But we don't have to do that with superheroes. Superheroes can just be pretty awesome. And they can do all that stuff unapologetically. Of course, now I think we're throwing in the cynicism and the humor into the superhero genre. And now there's a show which I have to say is one of my favorites, The Boys. Now, The Boys is sort of a reaction to the superhero genre. I mean, it shows normal people as fighting against these massive frauds, basically. I mean, typically corporate entities who are supposed to be, keeping the world safe, but they're really criminals. And it takes this group of very brave, eclectic souls to fight them and sabotage this corporate entity. The creator of the show, The Boys, on Amazon, is Eric Kripke, who was the creator of Supernatural, which was the first show he ever, I think, pitched to a network, and his first show was the longest running sci-fi show on I think any network, actually, aside from Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Was that 15
quite
seasons?
An achievement.
Yeah, quite an achievement. And so now he's doing this superhero show has some interesting stuff in it.
Okay, well, this one dovetails into that, having been on one of the longest running shows. Joshua Carter on Facebook is asking, in your time in Hollywood, what has been the most striking change, if any, since when you first started?
Well, I mean, I think the fact that streaming platforms have created a massive creative opportunity for people that didn't exist before. Before, the studios controlled things, not in the way they did, all the way up to the end of the studio era in the 60s, but they had control over actors' lives and what they could produce. And now you can make a movie on your iPhone, and you can sell this movie to a streaming platform and make a mint. Or I've had friends who produced shorts on YouTube that got 4 or 5 million views. That led them to getting some of the best, most high-profile management in the business, which then led them to be producing shows on Netflix. So, there's a billion ways now that you could get in the door. I mean, you think about Billy Bob Thornton was an unknown for many, many years. And then he did this little short, which he turned into a film called Sling Blade, and that put him on the map forever. But now anybody can do that. I mean, that was sort of an interesting and unusual way for him to make his bones in the business. But now you could do that. I could do that. Anybody could do that. So,
I love looking at the positive, right? So there's just sometimes, I don't know if we're wired or it's become a habit. It's like, well, this is going downhill and everything's falling apart. And there are, big threats and dangers, but also, I always like to say, to be objective, you have to have perspective. And part of the perspective is a bit of gratitude and a feeling of greater possibilities because of some of the technological changes.
Yeah, we're in the golden age of television now. There's a lot of crap being put out, but there's also a lot of great stuff. And it's a massive platforms that almost anybody can use. And what was unheard of, even at the time that I started in the business was crossover from television to movies. Television was considered a step down for somebody. You were either a movie star, a stage actor, or a television actor, and all of those carried a place in the hierarchy. And movie star was at the top, and a TV star was at the bottom. But now television is a space where people from every genre are crossing over and through. Big movie stars, big movie directors, theater directors, everybody's passing through the genre of television now and exercising their talents there. So it's a really, really fruitful time in that world.
Exciting. Okay, Elantra on Instagram asking, do you think that social media has made it hard for people to have the productive conversations and do things like the book exchange that you did that changed your life?
Yes and no. I mean, on the one hand, social media has exposed me to lots of fine people in the objectivist community, tons of people who were considered at one time part of the intellectual dark web, intellectuals and professors who I'm still friends with to this day. All were introduced to me and the surprise of my tweets, and it got me in with these folks who I have relationships with now and hope to continue having intellectual and business relationships with in the future. But like everything comes with trades, right? And you're magnifying these great voices, but also magnifying the bullshit. Excuse my French, but there's a lot of ways in which that media can be corrupted, and it's being corrupted. And there's really I don't think there's a monetary incentive to expose the corruption fully at this point. I think Elon Musk is going to try to do that, and I think that will bring some purity. But there's always going to be bad actors exploiting whatever system is out there for their short-term gain. For some gross, disgusting reason, and all we can do is just try to mitigate them by just silencing them in the sense that not allowing them to have the voice by continuing to fight with them,
to engage with them. I think there's a bit of objectivism in there in terms of not getting upset or not caring what people who want to hurt you or just not letting it bother you. And it's a skill that if you practice it and you make it your own, it'll help you in other walks of life.
The problem is I'll refer to this book by Cheryl Atkinson called The Smear, which it's a book about the fall of journalism, really. But the problem is that these people aren't just hurting your feelings. If they have enough of a yen to harm you, they will go to your employers and to your other working relationships and try to poison them. And you can have the best attitude about that in the world, but it's not going to stop that influence.
Very good point. I guess I'm just fortunate that I've got a particular job where it's going to be very difficult for detractors to shake me out of it, and I'm not too dependent on other people for other good aspects. So, but that would not be the case if I was working in Hollywood for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Sandy Pierre on Zoom, do you think there are more actors, celebrities who are objectivist, libertarian, but they keep quiet because they worry it will damage their career?
Absolutely.
Encouraging.
Well, there was a super secret organization of conservatives. That's it. Not so secret anymore.
Well, not so secret to me because
it did get exposed. It got exposed. Some rabid lefty infiltrated the meetings and started outing people who wanted to stay anonymous. And so I guess Gary Sinise and John Voight decided to close it down. But it has reinvigorated. I think I hope. I don't even know if I'm supposed to be saying that, but it should, because those people have as much a place in the world of entertainment as anybody else, and the left could learn from their perspective. I learned from their perspective. I'm not among them. I don't agree with conservatives, but I certainly find them a great deal more receptive to new ideas than some of the folks, especially college-educated folks on the left. And that says something, since conservatives are supposed to be
The mean ones, the
well,
closed-minded ones.
and the closed-minded ones. They're not supposed to be progressive anymore. But the unique thing about America, I think, is conservatism should have been conserving liberalism. That's what it's. That's where it's unique in the world of American politics and social philosophy. So our conservatives are now, I think, taking a different turn. But at one time, that liberalistic grain in them, I think, made them quite open to new stuff.
Yeah, now it's interesting, as I was referencing in my childhood, so I also, like you, grew up very progressive. In those days, we called it liberal. And Newton, Massachusetts, very Jewish community, never met a Republican, conservative, ever. So it was pretty easy to go around thinking that conservatives were, as I had absorbed, either stupid, impaired, or somehow just malicious and sadistic, mean-spirited. And so when I went to Harvard, you wouldn't think there would be that many conservatives there, or libertarians, but there were a couple, and it was quite a rude awakening for me to see that they were actually quite kind. And, at least the ones, not exactly a huge survey, but enough to make me have to go back and rethink a lot of what I've been brought up to believe, and try, going back to the drawing board for me. So that was helpful. All right, I've got a question here for me. Liberty Fire Medic Deputy asks, is there a story behind the $ brooch? There is, and I'll tell it to you briefly. Of course, Ayn Rand was one of the most unique gifts that she gave us, was this moral defense of capitalism. Capitalism received a heroic portrayal in Atlas Shrugged, and the $ features as a leitmotif in the novel. And Ayn Rand herself wore a dollar pin. She said that the $ as the symbol of the currency of a free market is the symbol of a free mind. So I wear it in homage to Ayn Rand, but I also wear it just as a practical marketing tool that as I go out, I can't read people's minds. I can't go up to everybody, ask them if they're an Ayn Rand fan, but by wearing this, I will sometimes get people coming out of the woodwork. So there you have it. All right, well, I'm going to go back to some of my questions, including, of course, I want to make sure we get to talk about the American Capitalist Party. What inspired you to start it? And who would be your choice to possibly run for president on the platform? What's your vision?
Yeah, so I was inspired probably about 5 or 6 years ago by Joe Sanders, a guy I met on social media, who's I think a financial guy. He's an investor. That's what he does. And we had a fruitful discussion back and forth about whether or not it was time for a third party to come up and take the other side, and maybe the statists from the Democrats and the Republicans could consolidate into one, and then all the individualists and liberals could fly over to this other party. And we went to great lengths at talking about it, and decided that it was at least time to put a platform out there as an island, an ideological island, or a refuge for people who were disillusioned by the Democrats and the Republicans and or libertarians. They could see a true representation of individual rights, at least in the concrete example of our party. And when we first put it out there, I did solicit a couple of folks, but they went to the Republicans where the money was. And I did attempt to get Justin Amash to come over he went from Republican to Libertarian, and I tried to get him to come over to the Capitalist Party, and haven't heard anything from him since my attempt to do that. Occasionally I check in with him and say, "You're on the wrong side, pal. You got to be." But he is one of the most thoughtful libertarians out there, and I'm very much against libertarianism in general. But he does say some great things, and I think he could make a very good candidate for the Capitalist Party if I could just sit down and talk him out of libertarianism. And I'm stupid enough in some ways, or maybe vain enough or prideful enough to believe that I actually can talk him out of it. So
you seem to be rather uniquely persuasive, though, I would say. So I wouldn't give up.
Good. Maybe it's my passion. Maybe it's my passion reads through. So at the moment, I think the only way the Capitalist Party can really grow, since I'm a working actor and that's primarily what I do, and I teach internationally acting, and I've been writing and producing my own stuff and my reality checks. I don't really have time to throw it all away to focus on trying to build up a party and go up against this massive kraken that they call the duopoly. The second you come out as a political party, they set their legal dogs on you and they try to take you out at the knees. It's really disgusting, really disgusting political monopoly. So what I'm hoping happens, and what I'm trying to encourage people to do, is to do it at the grassroots. Start at the local level. Somebody who's interested, right? Start somebody who's interested in putting this party on a ballot somewhere. Run under that moniker. Get the signatures that you need to do it. Get on the ballot and see what happens. The platform was written by Andrew Bernstein, who's written some great books on capitalism.
Spectacular, yeah.
Who's a great spokesperson for capitalism, a friend of mine. I like to consider him a friend of mine. I think he's an uncompromising voice out there, and that's what we need right now. We need people who are not willing to compromise ethical principles to make alliances. And I don't know if that was going to be a question later on, but I don't think that objectivists should be aligned with libertarians. I don't think capitalists should be aligned with libertarians. For the short end gain of getting a little bit of political power. Once you've compromised your values, they're done, they're compromised. I don't know that you can ever go back. Somebody in the chat may be able to convince me that I'm wrong, but I don't think so.
Well, I'd love to hear your perspective on what's wrong with libertarianism. Of course, Ayn Rand had her famous critique of libertarianism, the hippies of the right. Some of that also may have been aesthetic and cultural, though, of course, she was concerned about their sort of perhaps moral relativism. I have my own beef, but love to get your take.
What's your beef, and then I'll tell you mine.
I want to see us celebrate virtues and have some priorities. And I get very concerned when I sometimes feel that the arguments for drug legalization almost verge over into a celebration of drugs or drug culture. And rather than having a conversation about, it's really important that you take care of this. And addictions and drug abuse can be a really dangerous thing. So that would just be one example. I sometimes see the libertarian presidential candidates, they'll get addicted to every time they'll tweet about legalizing drugs, and they'll get huge engagement, and that's what they tend to focus on, rather than talking about, can we legalize some of the most productive activities like production and innovation, and maybe that should be more of a focus than if we had to choose one to go first.
Yeah, well, I think the reason libertarians highlight the legality of vice is a very telling thing, because they don't understand the relationship of liberty to reason and reason to virtue. A long time ago, Rush Limbaugh said something in his radio show that was true, but it was from a conservative perspective, so it was kind of screwed up at the same time, but it was nonetheless true. He said, liberty is the freedom to do what you ought. And when you think of the purpose of liberty is to subordinate violence to reason all across the spectrum of human action. And libertarians don't understand that. They see liberty as an end unto itself. They don't see it as a means of subordinating force so that reason can flourish. They see it as an end unto itself. So anything that impedes what they consider their freedom, which they, I think, equate with the feeling of being free or not, is an anathema. So you can have you okay, buddy? So you could have someone like Murray Rothbard, claiming that it's perfectly justified for a parent to starve its child to death because he shouldn't be legally bound or obligated to feed his child. That's an impingement upon his liberty. Liberty is doing what you want to do, what you feel like doing, not what you think you should do. So it's definitely emotion based at its very core. Mm-hmm. And they also don't understand the nature of government. They don't understand why we need government, again, to subordinate might to right and to raise reason, promote reason as the means of settling disputes. They think that giving an institution a monopoly of force is the way you don't do that. So they don't understand the nature of force. They don't understand that all force is a monopoly. They don't understand that government is a means of mitigating force. And those are the reasons I can't get behind pretty much any libertarian candidate, because in the end, they're anarchists who don't think the government is an appropriate means of dealing with violence and settling conflicts.
In terms of the candidates, what about Tulsi Gabbard? I know you'd like to see her run for president, but maybe not a good candidate for the Capitalist Party, the American Capitalist.
Well, I mean, there's apparently she likes UBI, which I'm not a fan of. But I have thought that she and Justin Amash would make a very good team. Her as vice president and Justin as president, or vice versa. I think she's very telegenic. I think she's been one of the more rational voices out there in our irrational universe, and I would certainly support her. And I said so on Twitter. I wish she would run for president, because with the present slate of candidates and potential candidates, she's the one I would vote for now.
Interesting. Getting back to your acting career, I understand that your supernatural fans helped you find your biological father.
Yes. So many years ago, I'm sorry, my dog is a little overheated, so I'm helping him out here. Many years ago, my mother.
What's your dog's name, by the way?
Frankie. He's 16. He's
not named after Francisco.
Not named after Francisco, but he's a little wiener dog, so he's like a Frankie. So many years ago, I discovered that my name father was not my father, but I didn't do anything about it. I don't know why I had no interest in discovering who my father was in my 20s, but I didn't have an interest. I'll skip all the complex stuff in relationship with Bill Pellegrino and just get to the chase. During COVID, I just decided to ask my fan base if anybody could find my father. I knew his name and I knew some details about him, and within an hour they found him.
Wow.
Yeah. So I found my sister, who lives in Orinda, California, and 3 brothers and another sister who live back east. All of them are polyglots. My father was born in Zurich and spoke fluent German, and then moved to Montreal, spoke fluent French. He became a banker, of foreign acquisitions in California, and spoke fluent English, and could speak pretty much any language of any country that he entered into within 2 weeks. So
that's amazing.
He was amazing. He passed away in 2009, so I never got a chance to meet him, but I have a pretty solid relationship with my younger sister right now. And I love talking to her. And she's also a polyglot. All of my brothers and sisters speak at least 3 languages.
And you?
Un petit peu français, mais...
Okay, so we'll add that to the nature versus nurture.
Right. Well, I'm learning it, but I do learn it quickly, so I know that the nature part is in there. So it's just a matter of sitting down with it every day and practicing.
Any roles that you've had to either learn some foreign language or an accent?
I've done tons of roles with accents and dialects. I've done Mississippi Delta, regions of Texas, regions of New York. I've done Scottish, Irish, Russian, Swedish. I had to speak an entire scene in Korean for Lost, and I had to do some
Wow.
Russian, some actual Russian in Lost as well. Uh, tons of. I've done about 3 or 4 different types of English dialects. So standard received pronunciation, Cockney, and a little Manchester. I've done all that. So
That's fun.
yeah.
So, did you, in your study of objectivism and the philosophy, did you ever run across Nathaniel Branden? Any thoughts on his work on psychology?
I did meet and run across Nathaniel Branden. I read everything Nathaniel Branden wrote, and then decided to take him on as a therapist in about in the 90s. And so he was my therapist for about a year. And it was a little intimidating, to be honest with you, because I had a great deal of respect for his work, and I was hesitant to show my weaknesses,
Oh my
in
goodness.
in
Wow.
there. But he was.
You wanted to kind of live up to.
I wanted to be a hero, an objectivist hero, before I was ready to be, and so I don't know that I was able to completely benefit from the therapy that he gave me, but it was certainly a very interesting and heady experience to have sat with him for a year. And I think he had a lot to contribute to objectivism. I don't think objectivism would be here as a philosophy without him, without his influence. The Nathaniel Branden Institute was what advanced objectivism in the 60s. And so, and he was the one who convinced Rand to write a textbook, for crying out loud, so that it could be taken seriously as a philosophy. So in that respect, the movement owes a great deal to him. I know that there's a split. I know that people don't like talking about Nathaniel, but I got great value out of him.
Well, we don't mind talking about him, which may be why people don't like talking to us. But I think that this would be an example of letting one's emotions get in the way. And of course, I'm sure it was extremely painful and disappointing for Ayn Rand when that didn't work out the way she wanted it to. But
Of course.
I think that split, which in some ways continues to this day, it was very traumatic for a lot of people and very confusing.
Indeed it was. I'm sorry, could you give me 2 seconds? I have to deal with something real fast. I'll be right back.
All right. And we will actually go to a couple of the questions. I'll see if there are a few that I can help with. Those are some good questions. His take on Rob Lowe and Mel Gibson. And let's see. Thoughts on, what are your feelings and thoughts on Jussie Smollett and the scandal? Well, I will, not here to comment on him as an actor, but I would say that is an example of what we see in terms of the elevation, the moral elevation that we see for people who can claim to be victims. And in this case, because there are a scarcity of actual victims of racial hate crimes, Jussie Smollett found a value in inventing one. I hope your dog is okay.
Yeah, me too. I think it's a little too warm for him up here. He's 16, and he was looking a little peaked. So I needed to get him downstairs where it was cooler and where there was water.
All right. Well, listen, we only have a few more minutes left, and I want you to focus on your household priority there. So any other things that we maybe didn't get to, or issues that
we just have to stay on it with our noses to the grindstone and become a dominant voice in the culture. That may not happen in our generation, maybe a couple generations down the line, but we got to do it now. We're at I think a very important point in history where we could go full collectivist and full status or full individualistic. And so we need to make the case for individualism hard right now.
Yes, and I would add to that, we need to do it creatively. And creativity is only possible to the independent thinker. So while continuing to promote objectivism as a philosophy, having tolerance for different points of view, even within objectivism, and encouraging people to take risks and to try something new and be willing to, make a fool of oneself. I certainly have done that many times myself. So, but that kind of willingness to take risks has allowed me to be more creative, and that has also allowed me to take on some of the projects which have been successful. So, Mark, it was really just a pleasure to get to know you. I want to encourage everyone, go to his Twitter feed and sign up for his YouTube. The content is excellent. And we hope our paths will cross again soon. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you very much.
And I want to thank all of you who joined us today. Thank you for your excellent questions. I want to encourage all of you, especially those of you who are in the Southern California part of the country, to check out our events page, because our gala is coming up in Malibu. On October 6th, we're going to be honoring Michael Saylor, and Peter Diamandis will be giving him the award. We have supporters coming in from around the country, and an opportunity for us to draw strength from each other and support the work of the Atlas Society.